this playlist will be about configuring editor Visual Studio Code the way I usually do it. So we're gonna go through all the settings that I usually use and review them step by step. So here I have default installation of VS Code with no custom configurations applied, and all custom extensions are also currently disabled. And we're going to specify all configurations directly in VS Code configuration file, which can be opened by running the following command in the command palette, open user settings.json. And by the way, to open up this command palette, there is a keyboard shortcut Command-Shift-P, or on Windows, Ctrl-Shift-P. And after running this command, VS Code configuration file will be opened. So in here I have applied only one configuration option up front, and this option is responsible for making all elements of the UI bigger for better video experience. Since if we're going to remove this option, everything will become smaller, so better I'm gonna keep it. And now let's start configuring VS Code. So the first setting, which is probably most noticeable thing when it comes to the UI, is configuring theme. And my favorite theme these days is called Aura Dracula Spirit. So let's search for this theme in the extensions panel. I have already installed this theme, so I only have to activate it. Here we are provided with 3 choices. I prefer the first one. So let's choose the first option. And there we go, everything was changed. And now we're gonna install another extension to change sidebar icons. And this extension is called Material Icon Theme. The same way we're gonna search for this extension, install it first, since for me it is already installed, so I'm going to activate it. And now, as we can see, all icons in the sidebar were updated. And by the way, we can notice that while we're installing new extensions, all appropriate configuration options are automatically added to our configuration file. And also we can see that next to every folder icon there is a little arrow, but I prefer to disable this error, so let's specify the following option, which allows us to disable those arrows. And the option that we need is called Material Icon Theme, hides Explorer arrows with the value true. And after applying this option, as we can see, those arrows disappeared. Next, there are also some guide lines that appear once we hover over the sidebar area. I'm talking about these vertical lines. So I would like to disable them. And to do it, we just need to apply one more configuration, Workbench 3, render indent guides, with the value none, like so. Let's go next, and now I'm going to move sidebar from the left to the right. So the option that we need in this case is called sidebar location. And let's specify corresponding value right. Then, since mostly I use keyboard shortcuts to do almost everything in VS Code, I also prefer to hide this activity bar. And to do this, we need to specify an option with the name activity bar visible and the value of false. As we can see, activity bar disappeared. The same thing we're going to do with the bottom line, which is called status bar. So to hide this line, we need to specify an option which is called status bar visible, also with the value of false. Let's continue hiding elements, and this time we're gonna hide this tab bar. So to hide the tab bar, there is also a dedicated option editor show tabs, and the value of false. So as we can see at the top right corner of the editor there are 4 icons. I do not use those icons, so to hide those icons, VS Code provides us with an option Layout Control Enabled. So let's apply this option, and after saving configuration file, those icons disappear. Let's move on and review the next option, which is called Startup Editor. And what this option allows us to control is this screen, which is automatically opened once we open Visual Studio Code. But I prefer to not open up this screen automatically, so I'm going to specify that option with the value none. And this way, after we're gonna reopen Visual Studio Code, as we can see, nothing is displayed except a VS Code logo. But if I'm going to zoom out a bit, right away I can see a couple of keyboard shortcuts that are shown right here. I prefer to hide these shortcuts. So let's go back to our configuration file and specify another option, which is called tips enabled, with the value false. And after restarting Visual Studio Code, we no longer see those keyboard shortcut tips. And now we're going to override some of the colors of our current theme, which can be done by using the following configuration object called color customizations. And the first color we're going to override called selected background of editor suggest widget. And this option is responsible for the color of the item of the suggestion widget. As we can see right now, since I specified color red, we can see that active item in here highlighted in red. So I'm going to specify more appropriate value to match my current theme. I have already prepared the code of this color, so we're gonna make the background color purple. And this way it looks much better. Next, I also prefer so that background color of the sidebar will match background color of the whole editor. And to make it so, I'm going to specify sidebar background key in here and choose appropriate color code. As we can see, after saving the changes, background color of the sidebar matches background color of the whole editor, and to me it looks much better. Next, we're going to tweak background colors of items in the sidebar, and specifically this item, which is currently active item. But since these items can be in different states, such as active state, hover state, focus state, etc., we're gonna have to specify several keys to override colors of all these states. So I'm going to quickly add all necessary keys in here that will allow us to override these colors: active selection background, inactive selection background, focus background, and hover background. And then for all these keys, I'm going to use the same color code. It will be purple. And as we can see, after saving the settings, the color of the active item in the sidebar was changed. And not only the color of the active item, but also color of different states, for example when hovering over these items. And for those, the same purple color is used as well. And at this point we're gonna finish this lesson and continue reviewing other VS Code settings in the next lesson. And the link to the repository with all these settings will be in the video description. Let's continue reviewing VS Code settings, and the setting that we'll start this lesson with allows us to hide this minimap. I do not use this minimap, so I'm going to hide it. And the option that we need in this case is called minimap.enabled. And let's use value false, and this way that minimap will be hidden. Then there are also these guidelines displayed in here. I prefer to also hide them, and this setting is called guides indentation. To hide it, we need to specify value false, and as we can see, those lines are gone. Next, there are some special characters which are shown whenever we select a particular area of code, and those special characters that are slightly visible correspond to spaces. I prefer to hide those characters, so the option that allows us to do it is called render white space. Let's use this option and specify value none. And after this, whenever we select area of code, we no longer see those special characters. Next, as we may have noticed, VS Code always highlights current line. And this behavior is also configurable. For example, if we want to have this highlight only in the left area, right where the line numbers are displayed, we can specify the value for the option render line highlight, gutter, and in this case, highlight will be present only on the left side. But if we'd like to completely disable this highlight, we can choose option none, and that's what I will do. The next option that we'll review is responsible for highlighting pairs of braces. So for example, if my cursor is currently inside of some block, for example in this color customizations object, and as we can see the opening and closing braces are highlighted, I would like to disable this behavior, and we can do so by using the following option, editor.match brackets. And the value should be never. So now we no longer see those pairs of braces highlighted. Let's continue. The next option that I would like to specify is called Light Bulb Enabled, and this option controls visibility of a light bulb icon. For example, sometimes VSCode shows this icon, which contains several refactoring options, like for example in this case. But I do not use this icon and prefer doing all those refactorings by using keyboard shortcuts, so in my case, I would prefer to disable and completely hide this icon, and which is why I'm going to use Light Bulb Enabled option with the value false, which is going to hide that icon. So after saving this file and checking it again, as we can see, there is no more light bulb icon. So let's continue reviewing the next setting. There are also some hints that VSCode shows whenever we hover over particular symbols, and those hints are always displayed on hover, but I prefer to show those hints only whenever I need it, so I'm going to disable this default behavior of showing those hints on hover. And later on I'm going to assign key combination to only show those hints whenever I need them. So to disable those hints, we need to specify settings hover.enabled with the value false, like so. The next option is responsible for showing these arrows, which are used to fold and unfold certain areas of code, but I also prefer to toggle these areas by using keyboard shortcuts, so I'm going to hide these arrows. We can do so by using the following option, called Show Folding Controls, and the value that we need for this option is never. And as we can see after this, those errors are no longer visible. Next, we're going to review a couple of options that allow us to configure scroll bars. So I'm going to create in here a very long line in order to show horizontal scroll bar. And since I usually prefer those scroll bars to be hidden, let's specify a couple of options that allow us to completely hide them. The first option, scroll bar horizontal, allows us to hide horizontal scroll bar, and the other option, scroll bar vertical, is for hiding vertical scroll bar. And after saving the file, as we can see, scroll bars are gone. And whenever I need to know at which position I'm currently at in a particular file, I only take a look at this little indicator. And this indicator is going to change its position as we're scrolling through the file. And if anyone would like to hide this indicator, it is also possible. The option responsible for hiding this indicator is called Hide Cursor in Overview Ruler, with the value true. But since for me that indicator is pretty helpful, I'm going to leave it. Also, there is this slightly noticeable border of this scroll bar. I also prefer to hide it, so let's use the following option. Overview Ruler Border with the value false, and the border is gone. And since probably most people would prefer to always keep scroll bars shown, I'm gonna demonstrate a couple more options, specifically for controlling thickness of scroll bars. These options are horizontal scroll bar size and vertical scroll bar size to control thickness of each scroll bar. And after saving the file, as we can see, the size of scroll bars has become bigger. So by using these two settings, we can control the size of the scroll bar. But in my case, I prefer to keep those scroll bars hidden, so I'm gonna revert these changes and uncomment these three settings before. Next, we're going to review a couple of options related to cursor. Currently, the cursor is blinking, but I prefer the cursor to be solid, so I'm going to specify another option, cursor blinking, with the value solid. And right after saving the file, cursor is no longer blinking. And by default, if we move around this cursor, this movement is not smooth, but we can make it smoother. So let's specify option cursor smooth caret animation with the value on, and right after this, if we try to move our cursor, we will notice that this time cursor is moving much smoother. And to me this looks pretty cool, so I'm going to leave this option on. The next option is called Tab Size, and this option allows us to control size of the indentation. But even after saving the file, if we try to add indentation, we still see that indentation size is 4 spaces instead of 2. This is because of another setting called Detect Indentation, and by default VS Code uses this setting to automatically detect what kind of spaces are used in the currently opened file. And since this configuration file uses 4 spaces for indentation, this means that this indentation size will take precedence over my setting. But since I prefer to control the size of an indentation myself, I'm going to disable this automatic behavior and rely on the top size option. So right after this, as we can see, indentation size now is 2 spaces. Next, let's review a few options related to font. The first option is font family, which allows us to specify the font itself. And currently one of my favorite fonts is called Dank Mono. But this font isn't free, and there is another free font called JetBrains Mono, which I also use quite often. Both of these fonts look great for coding, and the links to font Dank Mono as well as to JetBrains Mono I'm going to leave in this video description. The next option allows us to specify font size. I'm going to use value 14. Another setting is pretty cool, and this one is called font ligatures. And what this setting does is basically transforms some sequences of symbols, such symbols that are often used together, and displays these sequences of symbols in a special way. So, for example, if I'm going to save this file right now, we will notice that some of these symbols are going to change its look. For me it looks cool, so I usually prefer to keep this option activated. And finally, the last option, which we're going to review in this lesson, allows us to specify line height. And since I usually prefer the line height to be quite big, I'm gonna choose value 2.5. And at this point, we're going to finish this lesson, and the link to the repository where all these settings can be found will be in the video description. This lesson will start with the setting which allows us to hide the following area, which is called breadcrumbs. And this area usually contains all those folders that lead to currently open file in the editor. Or depending on the file which is currently open, for example in this case, if I open the file with extension HTML, we can see that this breadcrumbs area shows the structure of this document. And we can navigate between different elements of this document by simply clicking on individual elements. But since I never use this element, I prefer to completely hide it. So let's go back to our configuration file, and the option to hide breadcrumbs is called breadcrumbs enabled with the value false. And as we can see, breadcrumbs are gone now. Next, let's try to move the file in the sidebar in a different folder. And as we can see, we have this confirmation dialog, so we have to confirm our action. But I prefer not to be asked for this confirmation anytime I move files around in the sidebar, so I'm going to use the option called confirm drag and drop with the value false. And now I can drag files easily without being asked for confirmation. The next option is also relevant to confirmation, but this time this confirmation box appears after we are trying to delete some file. So let's also try to get rid of this confirmation box by specifying the following option: Explorer, confirm delete with the value false. And now I can also delete files without being asked for confirmation. The next option we're going to review is also related to the sidebar. For example, I'm going to create here a folder admin, which will not contain any files. So instead it will contain another folder pages, which will have only one file. And as we can see, by default, VS Code displays folders with no files in one row separated by slash. But I prefer to always have those folders displayed in a normal way. So I would disable this behavior. And to do so, we need to specify this option. It is called compact folders, and we will disable it. So now all folders are shown in the same way, regardless of whether they contain any files or not. The next option we're going to review is related to source control management system. my currently open project is initialized with Git repository, so if I'm going to make some changes, for example, inside of index.html file, in the sidebar, I can see that this letter M appears next to the file we have just modified. In my case, I'm going to hide this indicator. So let's specify an option git.decorations.enablet, and the value will be false. And as we can see, that indicator is gone. But those indicators are not only shown in the sidebar. For example, let's go back to index.html and remove this line. So right now we can see Git-related indicators are shown on the left, as well as in this scroll bar area. And since I prefer to use a separate application to review all my source control changes, I'm going to disable all those indicators. And to disable those visual indicators, there is an option with the name as cm.divDecorations with the value none. And this way, as we can see, none of the decorations are shown. The next setting allows us to automatically add empty line at the end of the file after saving, and since many programming languages have such convention that every file should end with an empty line, I prefer to activate this option. It is called Insert Final New Line. The next option is called Extensions.Ignore Recommendations, and this option allows us to disable some notifications related to extensions that VSCode sometimes recommends, depending on what kind of files we are usually working with. I prefer to not see those recommendations, so I'm going to disable this option. And finally, for me it's pretty convenient whenever all files I'm working with are saved automatically, and there is an option in VS Code which allows us to automatically save files after some delay. So I'm going to use an option called Autosave, and the value after delay. So after a little delay, the files will be automatically saved, and I don't need to save them manually all the time. So these were all the options I wanted to review in this lesson. Let's keep reviewing other options in the next one. In this lesson, we're going to switch gears a bit and configure integrated terminal. So in order to open up integrated terminal in VS Code, we can run the following command, toggle terminal, in command palette. And as a reminder, to open up this command palette, we can use keyboard shortcut Command-Shift-P, or on Windows, Ctrl-Shift-P. Another way to open up integrated terminal is by using this keyboard shortcut. And this is how integrated VS Code terminal looks like. By the way, it still uses default shell of the operating system. And on macOS operating system, the default shell is ZSH. So now we're gonna try to improve this integrated terminal a little bit by installing the following extension, which is called My ZSH. This is actually a very popular plugin for the shell ZSH, which adds lots of useful different features to the shell. In this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate the installation process by using macOS operating system, and most likely for Windows this process will be different. But I'm going to leave the link in this video description with detailed instructions how My ZSH can be installed on Windows systems. And before installing this extension, we need to make sure that we have ZSH installed. We can do so by running the following command in the terminal, and if this command will print out the version of the ZSH, that means ZSH is installed. And then we also have to make sure that ZSH shell is actually the default shell of operating system. So when we run this command and we get similar output, that means ZSH is used as the default shell. So we can proceed with an installation of My ZSH. But if ZSH is not installed, or for example it is not used as the default shell of operating system, there is more information on this page which shows how to install ZSH and also how to make it default shell on many different operating systems. So now let's get back to the installation of My ZSH extension. This is pretty easy, we just need to run the following command in our terminal. So let's do it. After successful installation, this command also creates configuration file .zshrc in the root folder of the current user. And right away we can also notice that the terminal has changed its look. This is the result of My Zsh extension, which also provides us with several themes. And the default color theme was automatically activated. Now we're gonna install one more extension, which is called Starship. This is so-called prompt for the terminal, the line which shows us which folder we're currently at in the terminal, and some other information. And also the installation process for Windows user might be different, so I'm going to leave the link in the video description with instructions how to install this prompt on Windows. So here it says that before installing this extension, we also need to make sure that we install special fonts called nerd fonts. We're going to skip this step for now and install all necessary fonts in the next lesson. And now let's proceed to the installation. So to install Starship, we have to run this command in our terminal. I'm gonna do so. Here we need to confirm the default path where the executable file of the Starship will be located. And also, if we are asked for our password, let's type it in, and installation will be successfully finished. Next, we need to enable this prompt in our ZSH configuration file. So to do it, we have to paste the following line in our ZSHRC file. I'm going to open up .zshrc file in VSCode and right at the end paste that line. After saving the file, Starship prompt should be activated. And we can make sure if everything went well by opening up another terminal tab. And if this prompt looks different now, similar to this, that means Starship prompt was successfully installed. But as you can see, some special characters are not properly displayed. This is because we are still missing some special fonts, which we're going to install in the next lesson. So as for now, we have installed all necessary additional tools to make our terminal look better. In the next lesson, we'll get to configuring VSCode terminal. In the previous lesson, we have installed a couple of terminal extensions that will simplify our work in the terminal. And these extensions are My Zsh as well as prompt Starship. But after installing the prompt Starship, we can see that there are some characters which are not properly displayed yet. And in this lesson, we're going to fix it. So, as Starship documentation recommends us, we have to install special fonts in order for those special characters to be properly displayed. So let's follow this link, and we're gonna end up on this website. And this website contains lots of different fonts for programming that support lots of different special characters. So let's go to the download page, and right here we can choose any font we like. I'm going to choose font called JetBrains Mono. So we have to install this font. Let's firstly download this, and the process of installing font will be different depending on the operating system. I'm going to show an example how to install the font on macOS operating system. So to install the font on macOS, we can use Fontbook application. Let's open up this application, and then we just have to drag all those font files that we have just downloaded and drop them right here onto a Fontbook application. And this way, all these fonts will be installed. And then we can go back to VS Code, open up settings file, and right here we're going to use one more setting that allows us to configure the font which should be used inside the terminal. So, but I still prefer to use the same font that I use for my editor, so I'm going to use font Denk Mono, but as we can see in the terminal font was changed, but a special character is still not displayed. So as a fallback font, we're going to use the font that we have just downloaded, JetBrains Mono Nerd Font. And this way, all those special characters that cannot be displayed by using my main font, they will be displayed by using the fallback font, which in my case is JetBrains Mono Nerd Font. And by the way, if we right-click on this area, we can choose which tabs should be displayed. I usually display only one tab, which is terminal, so I'm gonna hide the rest. And the same thing I'm going to do with the terminal tabs. So if I'll open up more terminal tabs by using this command, as we can see on the right side, all those terminal tabs appear. but I prefer to hide this, so I'm going to specify the following setting. And the setting that we need in this case is called terminal integrated, tabs enabled. And since I want to hide tabs, I'm gonna use value of false, and this way those tabs disappeared. But instead, in here we can see the drop down, which we can use to still toggle between open tabs. But honestly, I don't even use this drop down, and to toggle between tabs, I usually prefer keyboard shortcuts. And now we're gonna apply a couple more settings to improve the overall look of the text in the terminal. First of all, I prefer the line height to be bigger, so I'm gonna switch over to the settings file. Let's specify the setting which allows us to increase line height of the terminal, which is integrated line height. And the value I'm gonna use is 1.8. And this way, line height will be drastically increased. For me it looks much better. Let's continue. I also prefer to increase the font size of the terminal, and the setting that we need to use is called integrated font size. Let's use 14. And finally, the last thing I'm going to do in this lesson is change the color of this cursor. So let's go back to the settings file and find the color customization object where we override some of the colors of the current theme. And in order to override the color of the terminal cursor, we need to use the key called terminal cursor.foreground. And just to match colors of my current theme, I'm going to make this color purple, like so. And as we can see, color of the cursor was changed. So let's continue reviewing other VSCode settings in the next lesson. And the link to the repository with these settings will be in the video description. In this lesson, we're going to install one more very helpful plugin when it comes to working in terminal. But this plugin will only be relevant to macOS users, since this extension works only on this operating system. And it has lots of different cool features that provide seamless experience in the terminal. I mostly use this extension for auto-completion feature. So let's get to the installation. And by the way, as we can see, this extension works in all kinds of terminals, including VSCode integrated terminal. So let's install Fig, and after installation process completes, let's run it. Here we are asked to log in. I'm going to do it by using my GitHub account. And then, if necessary, to make this extension work in our terminal, we have to click this button and install a shell integration by clicking on this button install. After that, I'm going to change a couple of settings, specifically theme, since I want the theme of this extension to match my VSCode theme. And I'll choose theme called Dracula. And also in VSCode I currently use font called Denk Mono, so I'm going to use the same font for this extension. And by the way, Fig installation process also installed VSCode extension, so if we'll open up extension panel in VSCode by running the following command and search for an extension called Fig, we can see there is this new extension installed by Fig. And also there is a configuration option which was added to our VSCode configuration file, which is this one. We don't need to modify this option, so let's close this file. And to actually see Fig in action, we just need to restart VSCode, open up the terminal, and now let's type something and make sure that auto-completion will appear. And there it is. And the cool thing is that this extension provides auto-completion not only for default shell commands, but also for different tools. For example, for version control system Git, executable environment Node.js, package manager npm, and lots of others. So as we can see, this is a pretty helpful extension for daily work and will drastically speed up our workflow. And the link to the Fig website will be in the video description. Let's continue reviewing VSCode configurations in the next lesson. Let's review VSCode extension that allows us to customize interface. It's called Apc Customize UI++. Let's search for this extension in the extension panel and install this extension. I heavily use this extension in my daily work. After installation process completes, this extension should be automatically enabled. But if it wasn't, we can manually enable this extension by opening up Command Panel of VSCode by using keyboard shortcut Command-Shift-P, or in Windows, Ctrl-Shift-P. And in here, to enable Apc extension, we should execute enable Apc extension command. And in order for changes to take effect, we also need to restart VSCode. And before we actually start customizing interface by using this extension, on the extensions page there are a couple of notes specifically for users of different operating system. So if this extension for some reason doesn't work in your case, you might want to review these additional instructions in here. And now let's start using this extension. So the first thing we're gonna do is to try to make this area a little more compact. And to do so, we firstly have to apply the following option: window, title bar style, native. After saving the changes, we have to restart Visual Studio Code. As we can see, title bar was changed. But this is of course not the result that we need, so let's apply additional setting, which comes from Apc extension. This setting is called apc.electron. In here we have to use an object, and as the key of this object, we're gonna use title bar style with the value hidden. And after saving the changes, we once again have to restart Visual Studio Code. And after that, we're gonna notice that title bar has become much more compact. And this way we have more room for our code. Also, Apc extension allows us to customize position of traffic lights buttons. So let's specify an option with the name traffic light position. Here we have to use an object with keys that correspond to coordinates x and y. I'm gonna choose random values just to see the result. So after saving the changes, we can see how it affected traffic lights buttons. But I'm okay with the default position, so I'm going to discard this option. The next option, which we also specify inside this electron object, is called opacity, and this option allows us to control level of opacity of VSCode window. So for example, I'm going to use value 0.7, and after saving, we can see that our window has become transparent. I prefer to disable transparency, so I'm gonna remove this option. Next, let's make font of the sidebar same as font of the editor. And also the same font will be applied to the panel with a list of files. And since my current font of the editor is called Denk Mono, I'm going to use this font for the setting Apc font family. Let's apply the settings, and right away we can see that the font of the sidebar was changed. And the same font was applied to the panel with this list of files. Let's continue. In order to demonstrate the next setting, I need to show activity panel again. So I'm going to run this command toggle activity bar visibility in order for activity panel to show up. And what the next option will do is it's going to add an extra menu button to the top right of this area, right here. Let's apply this setting Apc menu bar compact with the value true, save changes, and restart Visual Studio Code. So after that, we can see the new button right here, and this button opens up the menu. And this is the main menu, which position depends on operating system. But if you like, you can also leave this option on to access this menu also from the activity panel. Next, we can also apply a couple more additional settings to customize activity bar. So for example, we'd like to change its position. We can position it on top of the sidebar by using value top for this position option. Or we can move it to the bottom by specifying the corresponding option bottom, like so. And also, we can change font size of icons inside activity bar panel. And then there is one more option that we can apply to activity bar, which is item margin. And this option is responsible for configuring distance between icons. Let's move on and go to the next element, which will be header. So, for example, we'd like to change height of this element, and to do so we can use option height. And let's see how it will be reflected as I'm going to change values for this option. As we can see, height of the header changes as well. Then we can also configure height, but for this element, this is a sidebar title, so let's use an option with a name Apc sidebar title bar. Here we also have to specify an object with the key height, where we can configure the height of the title. And in addition to that, we can also configure the font size. I'm going to use 12. To show configurations for the next element, I firstly have to make this element visible by running the following command: toggle status bar visibility. This is this status line which appears at the bottom of the editor. So let's start with configuring its position. To do this, we need to add an option apc.statusbar with the object where key will be position, and in here we can use desirable position. For example, let's use value at top, and status line was moved to the top. Some other values are bottom, also editor bottom. In this case, the status line is not going to be stretched full width, but instead will cover only editor area until the sidebar. Let's try using this option, and as we can see, status line is displayed only under the code area. And one more value is editor top. In this case, we get the same result, but the status line is shown on top. And there is also a couple of additional options we can apply to status line, which is height, that allows us to configure the height of the status line, and also font size, to configure the size of the font. The next configuration we're going to apply will allow us to increase or decrease line height of the sidebar items. And in the same way, we will be able to configure line height of the items in File Explorer. So first of all, let's apply different line height for sidebar items. I'm going to specify setting apc.listRow. Inside of this object, we have to use key lists, and here we should specify value in the form of array, where we list those areas where custom line height should be applied. And to apply custom line height to the sidebar, we need to use value explorer folders view. And then by applying additional option height, we can configure a desirable line height. And as we can see, as I'm changing this value, line height of the sidebar items also changes. In addition to that, I also prefer to change the font size of sidebar items. For this, we need to specify an option font size, and also to apply the same configurations for the items in File Explorer, let's add additional entry to lists array, which will be quick input list. And after saving the changes, we can see that the same line height was also applied to this list of files. And there is also one more area of the editor where I would like to apply the same line height configuration, which is this search panel. So to apply the same configuration in here, we have to add an entry results to this array. So as we can see, Apc Customize UI++ is pretty powerful extension, which allows us to configure VSCode interface in many different ways. Link to this extension as well as to the repository with these settings will be in the video description. In this lesson, I would like to show my configuration of the Apc Customize UI++ extension. So since I prefer to hide as many elements as possible, I'm going to hide activity bar as well as status bar. Let's start with hiding activity bar. So let's open up command palette and run the following command to hide activity bar: toggle activity bar visibility. And in the same way, we're going to hide status bar. Once again, let's open up command palette and run the command to hide status bar, toggle status bar visibility, like so. And now let's open up VSCode configuration file. And before we start adding my configurations, first of all, I'm going to remove all these configuration options which I do not use. So after saving the changes, VS Code should be restarted. Let's do so and start adding configurations. So firstly, as we can see, traffic lights buttons are not aligned with the file name. So to make the situation better, I'm going to use different value for title bar style option. Let's for example use value hidden in set instead of just hidden. After saving the changes, once again we have to restart VS Code. And as we can see, the alignment was improved just a little bit. So now what we're going to do here until the end of this lesson is we are going to apply styles specifically to individual elements of VS Code user interface. For example, in here, as we can see, icon is not aligned with the file name. So these kind of things we're going to fix. And Apc Customize UI++ extension allows us to apply custom styles to individual elements. To do this, we need to create here an object called apc.stylesheet. And in this object, we're going to write the following rules. Keys will be CSS selectors and values will be CSS properties that we're going to apply into certain elements. So let's see it in action. For example, I'd like to hide this button. Just like we did in the browser, let's open up Command Palette by using keyboard shortcut Command Option I. And then we just need to inspect that element we'd like to apply styles to. In this case, I'm going to use class selector. So as a key in this object, I'll specify title actions class. And the CSS rule that I need in this case will be display with value none. And as we can see after saving the changes, that button disappeared. Next, let's open up File Explorer, and as we can see around this File Explorer, we can notice a little shadow. I prefer to hide this shadow. And the same thing I would like to apply to this search bar panel, because in here we also have that shadow, so I'm going to add another CSS selector that will allow me to customize style of those panels. And to those panels, I'm going to apply rule box shadow with a value none. And this way, if we'll open up File Explorer once again, we don't see that shadow anymore. And the same goes with search bar panel. Next, let's switch over to the global search panel. In here, as we can see, file icons are not aligned with file names. So let's just fix this alignment by applying the following configuration. In this case, we need background position with the value 0 and bottom. So one icon was fixed, but we also have to fix the second one. And to do so, I'll have to add another CSS selector in here. After saving the changes, as we can see, both icons were fixed. Let's move on, and there is also this batch next to some file names, and the text inside of this batch is not properly aligned in the center. So let's add another rule to align the text inside of this batch. To align the text inside of a batch, I'm going to use padding rule. So this way the alignment was fixed. Now I'm going to remove left padding from the sidebar title. Again, let's use proper CSS selector to select the element we need and apply proper style, which in this case is padding with value 0. Next, there is also this outline which appears around the sidebar whenever sidebar is focused. I prefer to hide this outline, so I'm also going to select this element by using CSS selector and apply the style outline none. And also regarding this border on the left side of the sidebar, which separates editor area and the sidebar, I prefer to hide this border, so let's use CSS selector sidebar and CSS rule border with value none, like so. And as we can see, border is gone. Then I would also like to apply gradient to my cursor. In this case, we need the following selector: Monaco editor, cursors layer, cursor. And then I'm going to add this long rule which allows me to specify gradient. And finally, let's open up File Explorer one more time. In here, we still don't have a proper alignment between the icon and the file name. So we need to add one more rule in here. And apply the following CSS properties: display flex, as well as align items, center. And after saving the changes, let's open up File Explorer again to make sure that the alignment is fixed, as we can see it is. And this is my current configuration of Apc Customize UI++ extension. And the link to the repository with these configurations will be in the video description. In this lesson, we're going to install an interesting extension which adds all kinds of cool animation effects to Visual Studio Code, and this extension is called VSCode Animations. On the official page of this extension, we can see a demonstration of different animations that this extension adds. So let's install this extension, and after installation process completes, we also have to make a choice in here, because this extension works in combination with another extensions, either Custom CSS and JS extension or Apc Customize UI++ extension. So we're going to use Apc Customize UI++ extension, and to do so we need to click Change Install Method, and in the list of options choose Apc Customize UI++ option. After that, we need to install this integration and restart VS Code. And right after that, VS Code animations will be activated. And if we're gonna open up Command Palette by using keyboard shortcut Command-Shift-P or on Windows Ctrl-Shift-P, right away we'll notice that this Command Palette appeared with animation. And while scrolling this list, we also can see how animation is applied to individual elements of this list. Also, we can notice that while toggling the sidebar, animation is also applied. And pretty much all lists in VS Code have animation effects. For example, let's open up Extensions list and try to scroll it. We can see that new elements are added with animations and removed with animation as well. Also, if we'll open up any file and then make Autosuggestions panel appear, we can see that this panel was appeared with animation. And while scrolling this list of suggestions, we can also notice that the same animation effects are applied to individual elements of this list. Let's take a look at another example. For example, let's open up User Settings by running Open User Settings command in Command Palette. And in here, if we'll try to scroll this list with settings, we also see that the animation takes effect in here as well. So this extension VS Code Animation, after installation, adds several commands to Command Palette. And to access those commands, we can type in animations inside Command Palette. And here will be a list of all available commands that this extension adds. So from here, for example, we can execute the command to disable animations, which is disable animations command. And right now, we don't see any animations. To enable it back again, we need to run the command enable animations. So now let's just review several options one by one that this extension allows us to configure. For that, I'm going to run the following command, open animation settings. And here we have a list of all available settings this extension provides. For example, in here we can configure what type of animation will be applied to active list items. For example, let's choose option none to completely disable animation. And as I'm going to go through this list, we don't see any animation applied to active list items. And now if I'll choose indent and take a look at the list again, this time we notice a little shift to the right that is applied to active list items. I prefer using default value for this option, which is scale, so I'm gonna revert this change. Let's go to the next setting. By using this setting, Command Palette, we can choose animation type to be applied to the Command Palette. And this way, when opening up Command Palette, we can see a fade effect, as well as when we close this panel. Let's also check how the slide option looks like. When this option is activated, Command Palette appears from the top and also slides up when it's closed. but I'm going to leave this option as is with the default value scale. The next option is called cursor animation, which allows us to add animations to cursor as it's moved. Let's activate this option, switch over to any file and see it in action. So as I'm moving the cursor, we can see the animation effect was applied. And in addition to this setting, we can also configure a couple of extra options. For example, we can specify the color of the animation. Let's say I would like to use purple color, so I'm gonna go to my settings file. From here, I'm going to copy over code of the purple color and insert at this place. And now we will see that the cursor will be moved with the purple animation effect. I prefer to disable cursor animations, so I'm gonna uncheck this option. Next option allows us to configure timing of animations applied to different elements. For example, I would like to specify custom time for a common palette animation. So if I'll choose 2 seconds, then when opening up common palette, we can see that this palette is opened pretty slowly. And additionally, I would like to also specify 2 seconds for the scrolling animation. And right after that, as I'm going to scroll the list, we can see new elements appear slowly. I don't want to customize any timings, so I will discard these changes. The next option is called Enabled. And this one basically allows us to toggle animation effects. This is the same option that we previously activated from the command palette to disable or enable animations. The next option, scrolling, allows us to choose animation effect that will be applied to individual elements as we're gonna scroll the list. Let's take a look at the effect this option makes on individual list elements on the example of this extension list. So, as I'm scrolling through this list, we can see that new elements appear or disappear with animation. And if I'm going to change the type of this animation, we can see that the appropriate type of animation is applied to individual list elements as I'm scrolling it. I'm satisfied with the default value, which is scale, so I'm gonna leave this option as is. And this way, we have reviewed some of the main settings of animations that VSCode animation extension provides. For even more configurations, please take a look at the official page of this extension on GitHub. This page has pretty detailed explanations. And also for those who have some issues with this extension, or for some reason this extension doesn't work as expected, I would suggest to take a look at this troubleshooting section. This section lists some of the possible issues and the ways to resolve them. The link to the page of this extension will be in the video description. In this final lesson of this series, we're going to do some minor modifications to improve user interface. So firstly, I would like to change the variant of my current theme. To do this, I'm gonna open up Command Palette and choose Command, Preferences, Color Theme. In here, I can change my current theme. I'm gonna keep my theme, but I will change its variant and use Soft instead. This variant will be less contrast. Of course, now my color of the sidebar doesn't match the color of the editor, so I'm gonna switch over to my configuration file. In here, let's find an object where we redefined some colors of the current theme. And we need to modify the color of sidebar background. So in here, I'm gonna use a different color to match this color with the editor color, like this. Then let's switch over to the terminal, and in here at the top, we can see some elements which I don't really use. So I would like to hide this panel. We're going to use Apc Customize UI++ extension to redefine some styles of elements. First of all, we will open up Developer Tools, inspect the element that we need to apply styles to, and then we'll have to use appropriate selector inside this apc.stylesheet object to apply styles to that element, just like we were doing in one of the previous lessons. So to hide that panel, I'm going to specify style visibility with value hidden, like this. And once again, let's open up terminal, and this time we do not see the top panel. I would also like to make the line height inside the terminal a little bit smaller. So let's switch over to the configuration file, find an option with the name terminal.integrated.line-height, and instead of 1.8, we're gonna use 1.5. And with that, we're finishing customizing terminal. Then we're gonna work a little bit on this top panel to better align these three elements: traffic light buttons, file name, as well as sidebar title. So let's start with aligning traffic light buttons with the file name. As always, I need to select an element and then apply appropriate style. In this case, we're gonna assign padding bottom with a value of 6 pixels. And once I'll save these settings, we can see that the file name is better aligned with traffic light buttons. And now we also have to do the same to align sidebar title with file name. So again, let's select sidebar title by specifying appropriate selector and tweak line height property. Let's use 2.8. And after doing all these modifications, all those three elements are better aligned in relation to each other. So let's continue. We can also notice a little shadow at the bottom of the header, as well as at the bottom of sidebar title. So I prefer to get rid of this shadow. We can do so by applying the following rule. This will hide shadow at the bottom of the header, but we also have to write additional rule to separately hide shadow of the sidebar title. So let's do it. And we can see both shadows are gone. Alright, now let's closely watch the sidebar as I'm gonna toggle it on and off. As we can see, sidebar background changes while it's opening and closing, and this background does not match the overall background of the editor. And the same thing is going to happen whenever I'm going to toggle terminal on and off. So to fix it, we have to override background color of the whole editor. So to do it, I'm going to specify the following selector and assign property background with the proper color. And after saving the changes, as we can see, we no longer get that color mismatch while toggling sidebar as well as terminal. And with that, we are done with customizing Visual Studio Code. So now let's just recap what extensions and additional tools were installed during this course to achieve VS Code look we currently have. So the color theme that is used is called Our Spirit Dracula. Besides using custom theme for the editor, we also use custom theme for sidebar icons. And the extension that is used to change sidebar icons is called Material Icon Theme. Then, to have ability to even more customize interface of Visual Studio Code, we have installed an extension called Apc Customize UI++. This extension has great capabilities to customize almost every piece of interface of Visual Studio Code. Then, just to make VS Code interface a little bit more alive, we have installed VS Code Animations extension, and this extension adds animations to VS Code UI elements. Also, we have installed a couple of additional tools to improve integrated terminal in VS Code. The first extension was My Zsh, which is kinda like collection of tools and extensions to ZSH shell. In order to improve the prompt of the terminal, we have installed Starship extension. To get cool auto completions inside terminal, we have used extension called Fig. And by the way, besides auto completions, this extension also has lots of cool different features. As the main font, we have used font called Dank Mono, but this is a paid font, so we have also reviewed free one, which is called JetBrains Mono. And also we have to install special font from the Nerd Fonts family, just to make all special characters to look good inside terminal. And after using all those tools and applying configurations step by step, we were able to achieve this final minimal look of Visual Studio Code, which additionally has cool animations. And with that, we're finishing this series. The link to the repository with these configurations will be in the video description.